Welcome to Our Drummers Musicians. Recorded on a cozy couch in Brunswick, join us as we explore what it truly means to be a musician and speak to the diverse talents that make music in our city. I'm your host, Luke. Today I'm excited to welcome Evan Englezos, a dynamic leader in both the musical and digital realms. Evan's eclectic skills and experiences span from rock bands and musical theatre to church communities and disability support groups. As the founder and musical director of Live in the Saddle, Evan has cultivated a grassroots collaborative community project since 2011, which has involved over 140 musicians and 16 shows. His digital expertise is showcased through his work with Digital Team Coast, providing digital transformations and training organisations of all sizes. Evan has also been deeply involved in his church community, where he's led and organised music for various services and events, recruited and supported musicians, and managed music resources as a musical director. As the host of Tomorrow Pod, he shares grassroots stories about creating a better tomorrow through digital, collaborative, and creative processes. Join us as we delve into Evan's journey with music and his passion for building communities. We want to take a moment to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation as traditional custodians of the land in which this podcast was recorded. We pay our respects to their elders past and present. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, dude. Thank you. I can't believe I'm sitting here with you and this is really fun.
Well, it's been so long since I've seen you, and I thought, I know that, doing all of the different musical projects that we used to do together and stuff when you were running the various Live in the Saddle things over the years, and when you're musical director at the church I was playing at, we were doing lots of music things together, and then time's gone by, and I thought this would be a nice chance to catch up and get to know a bit more about your music history, and it's nice to see you again after all these years whilst I've been, locked in at home resting.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been locked in at home in different ways.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be able to come out and see what comes out of that, because it's not going to look the same as what it did, 5 or 10 years ago as well. And the whole scene in the arts industry and the implications that has on artists is changing rapidly as well. So,
does it feel like you fluked upon a good time to start your digital marketing company? Because that would have been 2018-ish, pre-COVID, and then all of a sudden everybody is trying to get their heads around the digital world if they weren't already in it in 2020 and beyond, because it's like you say, it's changed the world really, and all the implications on various artists that were unable to get work or trying to adjust into a digital medium for 2 or 3 years, and now we're sort of in this interesting hybrid. It hasn't really settled. Some people are just back to doing what they were doing. Some people are doing things completely different. I don't know, what's it feel like for you?
Yeah, so my background, I studied multimedia, so web developing has always been something that I've had as a tool in my tool belt. And so launching my digital team coach business before 2020, a couple of years before, and then being able to just be available to help people as they needed to navigate and transition really quickly. The timing of that was really great, and particularly in the first couple of years of COVID. And now for me again, because the needs and the requirements have changed for people and for organizations, it doesn't look the same as what it did in 2020. So I need to keep adapting as well, because we're all trying to figure out where the world's heading. Yeah.
Well, how does music fit into your life at the moment?
Oh man, it's a tricky one for me, because mainly my family come first, and I've got 3 kids who are hitting adolescence, and so there's not as much time as I would like. And I know I could be prioritizing things differently, but also when I have that as a priority, and my business, because I'm the only one who's going to run my business, and there's a lot of energy and creative energy that goes into that as well. And so I feel like a bit of a fraud being on the show today, because I don't feel like a real musician at this moment, but I know that's that's false, because there are going to be different seasons in life for different things too.
Do you still hold, part of yourself with the label of, I am a musician?
In a way, yeah. I think more broadly, I'm a creative being, and it just shows up in different ways. And I still know I'm a musician, and there are chances to sit on the couch and have a little strum once the kids go to bed or whatever. And I really miss it. I just wish I could rewind 15 or 20 years and just throw myself in again. But again, what happened in the past isn't where we are now. And so I need to be able to accept that and then go, okay, well, what can that look like now? And knowing that might be different in a few years' time when my situation changes again too. But, I've got a lot of deep, dreams and desires to be able to do a whole lot more.
Well, I think you definitely shouldn't feel like an imposter being here. This has been a really nice spot for me to just have a project to work on, whilst I'm still, I've been unwell for so long. And part of what I wanted was just to be able to catch up with people, to, hear what they're doing, find out a bit more about their music journeys. And part of it, as I was planning, I suppose, was thinking more about the real breadth of different types of musicians that there are. We've got some people that are a full-time professional musician. The only thing they do is play with an orchestra. But then we've also got I teach during the week, but then I play some shows on the weekend, and I'm studying, or I play with this group, but it's a side project of my life or whatever. And I thought you have this really interesting and great way of bringing people together to make music. And I thought it would be nice to find out a bit about where did that come from? Your ability to pull people together to play music together. It seems really special, and it was really nice when you asked me to get on board with one of your projects. And I met a lot of really amazing musicians. And similarly, it was if we use the Live in the Saddle example, it was a real mix of musicians. You had professional musicians in the band, and then you had hobbyists and music students, and someone who'd only strummed the guitar in a 4-chord church band. And it was a huge bringing together of all these different skill sets. And I think it's a pretty special talent that you have to be able to engage all these different types of people, as well as then to make music together that's great. And it takes a lot. So, and also I've just said a lot, but where did it come from? That ability, I guess, for you to do that.
Yeah, thank you. It doesn't feel effortful in a lot of ways, because it's such a natural expression for me. When I have music and when I have people, and I'm an extrovert, and I grew up in a big family with my great mum and dad are both Aussie, but there's a very heavy Greek influence, and that is just an open home and inclusive, and the hospitality that goes with that. And so I must have inherited some of that from mum and dad. Mum and dad met in a choir at Melbourne Uni back in the 70s, and so music's always been in our family. It's been in the blood. There's always been music in our home. So that's very briefly where that part's come from. And so for me, just that inclusivity is just so much fun, and you don't know quite what's going to happen, but when you say, I wonder if this person might go and be able to do this, and you bring this other person in, and what could happen, and what dynamics, and what could spark out of that. And I think you even became housemates with another guy who was in Live in the Saddle as well, and just cool little things like that. It's just super fun. And so I know for some people they need to sort of really heavily manage, is this person going to be okay with that person or whatever. And for me, it's just man, you just bring people into a room and see what might come out of it. And there's just a lot of trust in the process. There's I've got I guess an inherent positivity as well, and I'm not gullible, but I'm pretty trusting that I think this will be okay, and I think these people will step up, and when people come together with a common bond and there's a reason to be there. So for example, with Live in the Saddle, when we have we're going to cover a particular artist, a couple of albums or something like that, and when it's an artist that people love and respect, then they're going to come because they want to be there and they want to bring their best. And so you've got that common goal to start with, and people very quickly will let their guard down, in what you normally might have when you go into a new space with people who you don't know. It's just, the environment is different because you're there together for the same reason.
Are you happy sharing about like how Live in the Saddle sort of came together?
Yeah. So, I just had my first son, and so he was a little guy, and we were living out in the deep eastern suburbs of Melbourne, where we bought a place, and to drive into town would be almost an hour, and so I couldn't commit to any big musical project, and even going in and seeing gigs was just few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were pregnant then with our twin girls as well, and so I was really hungry to want to still have music in my life. And out east, there were some things that were on. There used to be a jazz club out in the middle of paddocks in Chirnside Park.
Oh, right.
Every Sunday night they'd have an open mic night, and it was such a cool thing. It was mainly music theatre based, and I've got some background in that, so I used to sometimes duck out there after the kids went to bed, and there's a lovely little outlet. But I wanted to still have music, and we had this basement in our house, and we sort of did it up and sort of made a bit of a music space, and I thought, well, let's bring the music in and bring it to us. If I can't go out to it, let's bring it in. And a few months earlier, I had gone to another little home jam thing. There were 5 or 6 people, and everyone brought a song, and we sort of just jammed around that, and that was cool. And then I thought, well, what if we did a whole album? Because I love the progression of going through, an album from start to finish, and you learn about the artist and the time that it was made and their creative process, and particularly then when you start to unlock the different sounds and the parts and everything, and then you move through that sequentially. There's something really cool about that, because today everything's just playlists and algorithms, and you miss a lot of the depth of what the artist has gone through to be able to produce this, piece. So that's why I thought, okay, well, let's bring a bunch of people together. Let's chart it all up in a big spreadsheet online and figure out who's going to be playing every part to try and replicate it as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'd love to be able to compose and write music, and I still dream about that one day. And so it feels like, okay, we're just covering someone else's work, but there's a different creativity that happens in that, because you're having to deconstruct and then reconstruct the everything that's gone into this album that's probably taken months and years to get to the point where they come into the studio and they produce it, and then we try and replicate that in real time. So it's an interesting format. It's a lot of fun. There are some really wonderful moments, and sometimes it doesn't quite hit the spot, but we're just doing it together because it's fun and we love music and we love what we're doing, and you bond and build a relationship over that and community. So that's what I've always loved.
Well, I guess, do you mind explaining, for listeners that don't know what Live in the Saddle is, but essentially, what do you mean when you say, it's different to just playing covers? And I suppose it's also different to a tribute act as well. It's like what do you mean by it's a recreation experience?
Yeah, it's like in some ways it's a bit of a glorified jam because it's not super polished. Like we're not a tribute band that's gone into the, rehearsal studios for a month and, really nailed it. We're bringing people like you said before, like you've got pros in there, you got people who, like me who used to play back in the day and others who, are sort of new on board. And so we might rehearse once or something like that. Sometimes we haven't rehearsed at all, and it's everyone just like you practice your parts at home, and then we're going to bring it together and see what happens. Essentially, we're doing it for ourselves first and foremost. We'll have some friends in the room or family in the room, and we even web stream it out to whoever wants to watch it. But we're doing it for the joy of the music. And
well, I think if I think about it, I really enjoyed playing. Like I've got a great memory of playing drums with Tim Coghill. We had 2 drum kits when we were doing like the Bon Iver like concert, and it was really fun to play. And like you say, it's not about like it wasn't about making music for the audience so much as it was about just trying to embody the parts from the album. And there was like an exciting nerdiness of sitting down and like deep listening and like transcribing all the different like snare drum parts and there's 2 drum kits on this part, so which part am I going to play and which part will I leave? And like it was like musically exciting, I suppose, for me, like the preparation and then playing it in a context which is quite different, like you say, to like a well-rehearsed tribute act that's like dressing up and like, trying to embody it, or like a cover band, it's like playing the songs, but not necessarily like trying to recreate the studio album. It's like an interesting and special spot, I guess. And I liked that you were like, it's about the musician's experience, which I hadn't thought about, but it's so true. That was, I guess, part of why I enjoyed it, like, because it was nerding out on like drum parts and drum sounds. Oh, which snare drum did you use for that? Oh, that's a trigger. So who can play the trigger? And was that something that you'd always enjoyed on the side, like diving into albums and trying to figure out what parts they were playing or which sound they used, or reading, liner notes to be like, oh, who played on this part and stuff like that?
I didn't geek out to that extreme. When I was, playing, for example, if I'm in a pit playing a show or something like that, and there's a whole lot of different keyboard parts that are required, and so, that'd be fun trying to listen through, what organ is that, or what sort of string tone is that, and trying to tweak it on my old Korg to get it as close as possible. That sort of thing, yeah. And again, like the album experience for me, that's what I grew up with. Whether it was on a cassette or a CD, you go to track 1 and you hit play and you'd listen through. And that was really sweet. Going back to what you're saying before, that it's not a tribute band or a pro show, it really is much more community based. I guess that, what sort of community music do we have here in Western society, here in Australia? There are choirs, and they're sort of coming back into vogue again quite a lot more, on the pub choir and that sort of stuff. And, there are bands, but typically, like, where else do you have people coming together and in an inclusive way? There aren't too many other things that I can think of. And so for me, it's like, for people like me who love music, who can't commit to something that's going to be, a regular gig or a regular band or something like this, but we can still come together and do it in a low key sort of way, but not that it's just like a piece of rubbish either. And like you said, like you're at home and you're studying it and you're really delving into trying to get it as close as possible. So people take it seriously as well. So it's this really fun and different sort of a process to the end result. And so much of it isn't about just what happens on the night, as fun as that is, but it's in the preparation that happens beforehand, in the communicating that takes place between you and your fellow musos have to figure out, okay, which bits is, how are we going to divvy it up? And yeah, it's just a different way of collaborating.
How's it feel for you, like having grown the project from, it being in your basement to being like, 20, 30 plus musicians like playing in larger rooms?
It hasn't felt much different in a lot of ways in the preparation of it. Now, during COVID, we did 2 or 3 online.
Yep.
And that was a very different process. But we wanted to just keep people engaged and keep it going in one form or another. And it was actually surprisingly really fun as well, especially like, okay, if people did pre-records, but we would still have interactions live between performers and, the different MCs as well. And it was, it just brought out a different layer of creativity for people as well. So I've forgotten your question again. I'm in La La Land. I'm really enjoying the flower on that bass over there.
It's very cute, isn't it?
It's sweet.
Yeah, there's a little sticker that someone's put on at some stage. That's a Hofner 182 from 1964.
Wow. Okay, so that it's 60 years old this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, would you like me to swap it for a less interesting guitar?
Please, no, don't. It's got to stay. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned, that you always had music in the household, and often it was like listening to albums, in their entirety.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about what it was like for you as a kid. Do you have some like, really first moments where you were interested in music?
Yeah, for sure. We got a piano, like a Yamaha upright, when I was about 7, and I had a few lessons, and I just enjoyed that. But I think what really got me interested was, Mum would play guitar. My uncle plays guitar and sings, and he was in a band, and we're 15 years apart, so we were pretty close. And he was just my hero growing up. And so when he played and he came around, and I would want to jump on, and he would do chords down the bottom, and I'd try and bop out some melody for Billy Joel, Moving Out, or Piano Man, or something like that. And he's still got recordings of it, that he's digging up. And so for me, that was very instrumental. Sorry, no pun intended. In my development, and just having that joy of music put into me from a young age, and so just I guess setting the environment for music to just be there and thrive in a way that's not pressured. We had Billy Joel and Simon and Garfunkel and the Beatles, and we had Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and Peter Allen, all these vinyls and cassettes. And so they were very influential when I was 3, 4, 5 years old. I remember them now. I remember spinning around the lounge room, just loving all of that together. And so now that I've got kids of my own, and they've had some lessons. I think Jem, my son, got lessons with you back in the day as well, drum lessons, and that was really cool for him. But even when he finished having lessons with you, he kept playing because he loved it. And so we would just have instruments in the home, and we wouldn't demand the kids to have to practice all the time, and they just get on, and all of them play and sing in different ways now, because the environment was set that way. So that was modeled for me, and that's what we're doing for our kids. And that's the joy of music, and the joy of being able to pass that on as well to the next generation. Yeah.
What's it like when you get to make music with your kids? Like, I remember there was a phase where like you and Jem were like recording a bunch of stuff together that he was like writing, and how does that feel?
Oh, super fun. And then he basically, through that process, he taught himself Ableton. So he doesn't need me anymore.
Right.
I'm out, man. Like, I'm so uncool. And, with the girls, my daughter Phoebe loves K-pop, and we're just, singing and dancing around the kitchen and being silly together. It's really fun. And that changes over time as well, because as they get older and they want their independence and they discover music themselves and it's like, oh, I didn't know that. And, the K-pop, I didn't introduce her to that. She introduced, that to all of us. And so, that's, that's cool because I don't own it. I don't own them. They're, there are things we get to do together and they become their own people as well. That's how it should be.
So what was your journey like through high school then with your music?
Yeah, so I loved playing the piano, but that was a very private thing at the start of high school. And, I taught myself some chords and, trying to read music a little bit. That was fun. And then year 9, I got, they started a jazz band, might have been for the first time. So I got to play piano on that. And so learning jazz chords was, just helped me to level up a bit. I wasn't great at all, but again, it was just having the opportunity and setting the environment to be able to play with other people and to enjoy it. It wasn't the best, but it was just having those opportunities was so important. And then going into school musicals, again, just when people encourage you. For me, it was a couple of different teachers that just gave me that opportunity and said, hey, you should have a go. And if they didn't say that, I wouldn't have done it. And so for me then, like, you said before about, my role as the music director in a church. And for me, it's just about encouraging people to have a go and to identify some potential and helping to release people and open up their idea of what creativity and what music can be and what it can do. I've always, because that was given to me, I wanted to pass that on in whatever way I can.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, like I think about a couple of teachers, Julie Wells and Elizabeth, whatever her name was. Like they just tapped me on the shoulder at the right time, even though I didn't feel ready. But like that's changed my life. If they didn't do that, I wouldn't be sitting here with you now. Yeah.
So where did it go from there once you got like a taste of these like, new musical experiences of learning jazz chords and opening up to like music theatre opportunities?
Yeah.
Where did your music take you next?
Yeah. So after high school, like I did my multimedia degree, but I also studied music theatre at the National Theatre for a year. And, I was 18 and young and my eyes were just like open to lots of different stuff. And that was wonderful. And then did some more music theatre. I was involved in a couple of rock bands, one with my uncle, which was great. So his name's Dallas Cosmos. And so, I was in his band and, we recorded and we gigged and, got to play at the ESPY and those sorts of places. And I was, 19 or 20. He just really nurtured me. And again, just like someone who believes in you, how, crucial that is. Well, that was to me. Some people are really self-driven. And for me, having other people who could encourage me was, really important. And then, then started a cover band with my brother Andy, did more music theatre. One of the coolest things that happened for me was I got to work on a summer camp in upstate New York, and it was like a music theatre, Broadway, Jewish kids who just want to hit Broadway, and like they're all there as this massive camp. So I got to be a music director on the camp there.
Wow.
In that process, I got to meet and then associate with a Broadway composer called Jason Robert Brown. And so, and then a few years after that, when I went back to America again, I got to be his music associate on this production in LA.
Wow.
and like working with the best of the best. And so like just to have experiences like that have just been, like the highlight of my life sort of thing.
Yeah, what was that like?
At the best. When I was just like, okay, I don't even know that, everyone's just really relaxed. Didn't know that they were the best of the best, but they just are, and they're just real people, having dinner and hanging out with, these, just people who are great at what they do. And again, the music theatre, what I love about that is it's so collaborative. I can sit in my own, little home studio and play by myself. But for me, it's always about doing so much more and making something so much more than just what I can do on my own. Jacob Collier is a freak and he could do everything on his own, but I'm not him. Like, I need other people around me to be able to vibe off and to be able to be my best. Yeah.
I think now that I think about who we've had on the show, I'm not sure if we've spoken properly about music theatre with anybody. What is it about music theatre then? Because like you mentioned, like, it's like the collaborativeness of it. And I've played in a few musicals, but I've never been like part of a cast other than, I don't know, in primary school or something. I was sang in The Wizard of Oz. But musicals was always my sister's passion, and I was sort of opposed to it, as, I don't know, sonically it didn't excite me that much. But it's interesting hearing you talk about, it was like the collaborative nature of it and all these different community projects. And if I think about the people that play in musicals, I think, there's this like connection of like the people in the cast, they've gone through this process of all like the rehearsals, and then like they're creating the same show, and you're going through life together in this like really intense phase. But that's sort of like my sideline view. You know, what was it like for you? And then I guess in both levels of like the community stuff and to all the way to, you know, the top end professional. Did it feel, you know, that different? And anyway, sorry, I'm asking you too many questions at once.
All right.
Take whatever you want, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Well, I've had the opportunity to be both, you know, in the pit with the band and also on stage, and then also like being, you know, music director or associate music director, and being on the keys, and so being present and sort of being this conduit between the band and the performers on the stage as well. And you know, there's a different feel and perspective in each of those, but it's also going to depend on who the group is and how well they're gelling, and you know, why they want to be there. Like, is it just a bunch of divas who want to do their thing or not? And so, yeah, you learn different aspects of that from, you know, sitting in the different roles. And I love, you know, being able to, the story that gets told in a piece. And so for me, you know, when I was 15 and saw Les Mis on TV for the first time, which was not my jam at all back then, but like it just impacted me, you know, to the core. And so then I got to do that show 8 or 9 years later and be on the stage as one of the students and in the ensemble, and such a rich time. And even like that's 20 years ago. And so people in that production are still my friends today, which is, you know, that doesn't always happen. A lot of the time that doesn't happen. But, you know, when the environment's right and you meet the right people at the right time, it can change everything. And so I just, you know, I think a lot at the moment about posture and position. Like, what posture am I in and what position am I in? Because I can't make stuff happen, but what can I do for myself? And so if I have the right posture and the right position, then something's probably at some point is gonna happen that's going to, you know, either change my direction or help me meet someone who I need to meet or whatever it is. And so, yeah, again, there's just so many different elements that happen, and so much that happens behind the scenes in a production, like a music theatre production as well. And so many people who are in thankless roles, but they're made to do that and they love doing that, which is great. And then there are people who are just meant to be on the stage and front and center, and other people are meant to be, you know, calling the shots. And I guess I've learnt different things from that. And so for me, then being able to fast forward and bring that into the time of my life I'm in now, whether that's pulling together a Live in the Saddle piece and just, you know, collaborating with people and trying to set that right tone and right environment, and, you know, the communication behind the scenes, all that sort of stuff. You know, I guess I've learnt a lot without even realizing it by going through those experiences. Yeah.
How does it feel to like reflect on this? Like, you know, having me ask you questions
in my rocking chair here now.
Like, yeah, I feel like the way you put it, like, oh, like in this phase or like this chapter of life, like there's been all of these different journeys of like, you know, your time invested in different projects and different jobs and of varying degrees. And, you know, like who knows where the future will take you, like you say. But what does it feel like reflecting on, the impact of music throughout your life? Is that something that you think about often, or I don't know, does it feel unique to be like reflecting on it in a current and positive way?
Yeah, this is a really special time and time where I can just sit down and take a step back from my everyday world to be able to think about these things and reflect on it. So occasionally I get to do that. And so right now, as I'm talking with you, Luke Singleton, I just makes me realize how rich I am, like having such a rich upbringing and rich experiences and opportunities and the people I've got to meet and work with along the way and people who I can call friends. And it's, man, I just feel blessed when I look at it through that lens. And again, I feel like, there's so much more that I would love to do, but I guess we've all got that yearning and desire too. So and that's why the future's the future.
Are there any things like in particular that you're like, oh, yeah, maybe in another like 5 or 10 years when, the kids have finished school, I'd love to have some time to like really dive into X?
Yeah. When I was 20, I always wanted to write a musical. It doesn't feel as strong now. I'd love to be able to write an album, and I'm sure it's not that hard. And so part of it is time, but then I also know that's an excuse, and discipline's probably another reason why that hasn't happened yet. I listen to such a broad range of music. A lot of what I listened to in the last few years, Icelandic bands, and particularly Ólafur Arnalds, who's a neoclassical composer and pianist, and just the depth and the beauty and the simplicity of what he makes. I just love to write an instrumental album like that. And yeah. So, I mean, all these things are possible, and and so, look, if that could happen in a few years' time, then that'd be really sweet.
If you'd like a collaborator on your Icelandic album made in a cabin in the woods, let me know.
Oh, sweet.
I've got a couple of Ólafur Arnalds albums, like records over there.
Cool.
And it's funny that you say that too, because when I had Tony Floyd on the podcast ages ago, he was sharing all the Icelandic musician albums that he'd been listening to recently.
Yep.
And I'm a big fan of the album listening experience. So I should ask you, what's the most recent album that you've listened to?
Yeah, so when Jacob Collier's Jesse Volume 4 came out on Leap Day this year, which he's just a freak of nature, just the way he sets everything up. That album blew my world apart. So I just hadn't heard anything like that before. I thought it would blow the whole world up. It didn't. It just blew my world up in a really great way, and just trying to deconstruct what the heck is this guy. Just the way his brain works, and then the way he functions, the way he collaborates. Again, the collaboration. There's so many collabs on that album, and number of languages and feels and cultures that get brought together. And that's been my highlight of the year. I went to Fed Square at 11 p.m. that night because he dropped that there were going to be listening parties all around the world, and you had to sort of be at a particular spot to be able to get access to it. And I found out about it like at 9 p.m. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to Fed Square. And
oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, it was just amazing. So that's one album that comes to mind. Well, I listened to a lot of Ólafur Arnalds, and Punch Brothers in the last few years have really been a go-to as well. Just their virtuosity.
I don't know them. What do they do?
They are a 5-piece bluegrass, folk, bit of rock, bit of classical, bit of everything. It's just led by Chris Teely, who plays mandolin. And so there's 5 of them, and they're just virtuosos in their own right, and they come together and just make something that no one else could create. And, there's some artists where I just go, we could not do that in the saddle. It just, you couldn't recreate what they do. So, just so much respect. And I just love how so many different sorts of music can bring so many different new elements into life and into seeing the world. Yeah.
So what's it like with your family now in the age of playlists and singles? Do you still encourage full album listening at home?
I would love to encourage it. It's it's really hard because the world that the kids are growing up in now is so different to what we grew up in. They've got their devices and they've got their whatever streaming services they have. For the kids' birthdays, my daughter got a couple of albums, and so put that on the iPod, and then they can listen to that. They're still going to jump around or whatever. But when Jesse Volume 4 came out, without strapping the family to the couch and putting seatbelts on them, like they sat down and listened to most of it anyway, and
cool.
It's like, oh, I should do that more. That's a good thing to do. Or if you're in the car, that can be an opportunity as well because they're not going to go anywhere else. So I really should be encouraging that more.
Well, we've been playing this game on the podcast where I get each guest to ask a question of the next guest. And it takes interesting turns because, at various times, different themes have emerged, and so it sort of continues on. But also the drama of no one knows who the next guest is. So sometimes the questions hit really well, and sometimes they miss. And I'm going to ask you I'm going to play you the question from the previous guest, Kathleen Halloran, amazing guitarist.
Yep.
My question is, it's not so much a question, but more of a conversation. Tell us about the first moment that comes to mind where you knew that music was forever for you as a career.
Now, we've slightly hit a miss here where music hasn't been your career forever. But I would like you to answer it anyway, because I had a guest ask me this, and similarly, I went, oh, well, actually, music felt like forever for a time, and at the current time, it's felt like, that's definitely a huge part of my life and something that I do, but it's not the entirety of my career.
Yeah.
Was there a time for you that it felt like Kathleen's question when you were perhaps doing the professional Broadway work where you just felt like, yes, this is my life?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Kathleen and Luke. So it was probably before that, I would say, because it's from a very young age, it has felt like part of my identity in not as everything, but as a big part of who I am and how I've see myself. And so probably part of it was just the influence from Dallas and just that love and the joy from a very young age. And I would probably also say some of the early on music theatre experiences, which then led me down the track of going and pursuing that after high school as well. So it was a very, at that age when you're a teenager, so much of what, you get fed and what you then hold is so influential over the path that goes ahead.
Yes.
So I would probably say around that time would have been, a real moment for that for me.
What was it like professionally for you? Like if we focus on the career thoughts, music theatre can be so fickle, I suppose, in that often the length of time a show runs is just based on ticket sales. And so you might get lucky and, Moulin Rouge in Melbourne has been running for years. But also there's a whole bunch of tiny theatres that couldn't even get booked, or they ran and they only ran for a couple of weeks and then it was gone. Did it feel for you like longevity of career in this, or did it feel like I'm in this chapter now and we'll just see what comes next?
Probably the latter. Yeah, I haven't felt like music theatre is my forever. Probably more broadly, just music in general in one format or another. And and also not in the traditional sense of this is my, I'm going to make this my full-time gig
Yes.
ever. Partly because I think my parents wanted to encourage me to not make that a full-time career, which at the time I wasn't particularly happy about. Well, what if I did try and maybe pursued it, and maybe I did, but I'm glad I've got other aspects to my life, and also just the decisions I've made in life to have a family and the different priorities and circumstances that come out of that, and so I guess sitting here now with you, I accept the decisions that I've made, even though sometimes I wish, I wonder what would happen if that was different. And that's okay.
Well, don't we all?
Yeah. You get what you're given, and so then the choice is, well, what do I do with that? Yeah.
Well, what would you like to ask our next guest?
Great. Okay, I don't know who it's going to be, but this is my question. Next guest, share a time when music has pulled you out of a really difficult place. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Is there a time that, is resonating with you that was making you think of that question?
Not at all. But I was sort of just prepping before when you said you get to pass the question on to the next person. Do I have to answer that myself? No, I might just leave it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we like to finish with 5 quick answer questions.
Yes, sir.
What is your favourite venue to play in Melbourne?
I'm not that experienced. I guess the SB, back in the day was fun. I haven't been there in a very long time. Yeah.
Actually, well, we should touch on slightly on playing in the church scene. Is there any, churches that you've played in? I would still consider them a venue.
Sure.
But yeah, I guess maybe it didn't come specifically into that.
Yeah. I've played a few times at St. Paul's Cathedral in the city. And, for acoustic music, that's, makes some, really sweet sounds in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a special place.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
so reverberant and huge.
Yeah. Just an aside, a couple of years ago, they had this exhibition where they had this giant globe that was it's about 7 meter diameter or something like that was sort of right in the middle of the church, and it was open to the public to go into, and then it would rotate slowly at about, I think once every 4 minutes it would do a full rotation, and that was really beautiful in there. Yeah, so it was a great space.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, well, what is your dream venue to play at?
Oh, I love Palais and Forum. That'd be great. When I went to Barcelona many years ago, there's a venue there called the Palau de la Música Catalana, and it's basically this music palace that was built 120 years ago by the people, and most of it is just stained glass, and it's like you're in this glass garden. And one of my favourite guitar concertos, the Concerto de Aranjuez, was premiered in there in 1945, and it's just glorious. I would love to go back again, and I would love to build a venue like that here in Melbourne one day.
That would be so special.
Yeah.
What is your coffee order?
I'm pretty boring. Either a latte, but I love summertime being able to have an iced latte.
First iced latte on the show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What is your favourite place to get food after a gig in Melbourne?
See, when we do Saddle, often, people just bring food and we've got all this good stuff there, so we don't really go hungry. And I don't know. I can't answer that very well, but I love Thai food and Mexican, so yeah.
All right, and finally, finally, what is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
Start writing. Just write and go for it, and put it out there, and don't be afraid of what other people think. Yeah, that's huge. I haven't quite learnt that one yet. Yeah, because, you know, I don't want to put something out there until it's pretty good. Yeah. And so, yeah, start writing and put it out there. Yep.
I think
So I'm telling my older self that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Current advice and younger advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's great. That resonates with me too. I've sat on so much music that has never come out because it was never good enough. And yeah, I think that theme is quite consistent throughout musicians, and they just happen to deal with it in different ways. Some of the guests have like shared how easy it was for them to put music out, and others that it was so hard, and others that sort of, you know, were trying to reconcile a way to get it out, even though they weren't quite happy with it from like their perfectionist angle. And I think it's nice that, yeah, you can give the advice, but also take it on and
pass it on to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Evan. This has been really lovely and special to go through and hear all your different thoughts and perspectives, and a bit more about the journey you've had through, all the various different collaborations that you were involved with and made yourself. So thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Luke. Yeah, I'm really honoured. I don't feel like your typical muso, but I guess we come in all different shapes and sizes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Our Drummers Musicians. I hope you enjoyed diving into the world of another musician as much as I did. Help us grow by leaving a review and sharing the podcast with your friends, family, favourite artist, or anyone else who might enjoy it. For more info and updates, visit ourdrummersmusicians.com. See you next time.